Hey, welcome to the Cliff's Edge live stream, doubling once again with the Beyond Politics podcast. I'm Matt Robeson, coming to you once again on the Cliff's Edge YouTube channel and the Worth Knowing Substack and a few other platforms as we expand our reach into every area of the globe, including islands populated only by penguins, just like Donald Trump's tariffs. If you were hoping to catch a glimpse of Cliff Schechter on today's live stream, you will not be disappointed. Cliff will be joining us later in the show to talk all about the exciting work he's been up to and his upcoming stream later today with a huge guest. I don't want to step on it. It's pretty cool stuff, but that is coming up also later in the show. And also later on, we're going to be having my friend, Washington Monthly contributing editor Ann Kim, the celebrated author of Poverty for Profit, which is a really outstanding book. You'll hear more about it later. She's an all-around economic expert, and we're going to talk about Trump's biggest, most fundamental mistakes that have led to the slow-motion train wreck, not just in the U.S., but around the world in markets over the last few weeks. But first, I want to tackle two topics, one which the Trump administration very much wants us to talk about for some reason, and the other that they very much do not. I'm talking about the potential extinction level event of Donald Trump being able to ignore the Constitution and send anyone he wants to a foreign gulag. That's the topic he apparently does want us to talk about, because the White House believes that when we talk about immigration and deportations, even if we're talking fundamentally about Trump sponsoring state terror, as former Vice President Al Gore said over the weekend, taking a play right out of the historical lessons of the Third Reich, the White House thinks that that's better ground for them to be on than the economy or the other story that blew up again over the weekend, which is the Keystone Cops cabal in charge of national security under Pete Hegseth. Maybe they're right about that. Maybe they really would prefer to be on those topics. And look, I'm an all of the above kind of person. I believe we can keep our eye on the ball on what Trump is doing to the cost of living in America and the way he's threatening our security and the safety of U.S. service members. And we can, and frankly, have to talk about the fundamental threat he's posing to the Constitution. So we're going to cover all of it. And to start us off, I want to welcome on my longtime podcast partner on Beyond Politics, former U.S. Congressman from New Hampshire, the national co-chairman, and there were only like two of them. So they weren't just handing these out. He was the national co-chairman of Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. And critically, for this very first topic we're going to tackle, former prosecutor Paul Hodes. Paul, welcome aboard.
Does this work? Am I on?
This works.
Oh,
you are live. You are
live
actually still alive, which, if we had a defibrillator, we could also assure that. I want to, as I so often do, lean on you for your legal expertise. We'll lean on you for your congressional expertise in a few minutes, but I really, you're very good. You are admitted to represent before the Supreme Court. You are a long-standing member of the bar. You are a former prosecutor. I want to talk about the action in the Supreme Court and what it means. Over the weekend, the Supreme Court issuing an emergency ruling, a stay on the ability of the administration to deport more people. Apparently, there's been some reporting on this that, according to NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, they actually got videos of ICE buses with Venezuelans making an about face on Friday. I shouldn't make light of this. I don't mean to, but you can almost insert a screech sound in your mind, like literally tearing, donutting around. They were on their way to the airport where these Venezuelan migrants would have been deported. And it's not clear if they would have gone to Venezuela or to El Salvador, but it seems like this Supreme Court 1 a.m. order Saturday morning was very much needed. And essentially they stepped in and said, stop. What did you take away from this kind of extraordinary, although extraordinarily brief order?
Well, first of all, it's extraordinary that this happened basically in the middle of the night. I mean, when was the last time we saw an order from the Supreme Court at 1 a.m.? Who's awake at 1 a.m.? I mean, these people are old. I mean, they need their sleep. Something must have been keeping them awake. So
I think Clarence Thomas was mid-cruise
well,
on.
Clarence Thomas was on his bus somewhere,
Right, exactly.
his very expensive bus.
Yes.
But I don't want to get too deep in the weeds about all the machinations that led up to this order. Let's just say that the issue of deportation and the authority of the executive branch to use the 1783 Alien Enemies Act to do it had been already through a number of different district courts and appellate courts. There had been there'd been issues around the Kilmar-Garcia. There'd been a lot leading up to this order about the Venezuelans. This was the plaintiffs or petitioners in this case had tried to go to two different federal courts before they went to the Supreme Court to get an emergency order, neither one of which would give them their relief or a hearing, which to me makes it even more extraordinary that the Supreme Court weighed in this early morning, late night, middle of the sleep cycle decision. And remember, this is a Supreme Court that on a previous issue had gone 5-4, essentially for the administration, putting aside the lies that were told about a 9-0 favorable decision. This was a 5-4. There'd been a 5-4 decision saying basically, yes, you can deport people, but you need to have due process. That's the critical piece. So remember, that was still outstanding around the issue of Kilmar-Garcia. You've got to have due process when all this arose with the Venezuelans. So here we are in the middle of the night. I think that given who is on the Supreme Court, given what we've seen in terms of the Supreme Court's favorable decisions towards this administration, the fact that this was a 7-2 decision that had a lot more clarity than any of their other previous decisions. Remember, the decision in the Kilmar-Garcia matter had kind of left things out up for grabs.
Right. They left an opening. They left an opening
to facilitate his reentry. This order was crystal clear.
Well, let me ask you for a clarifying piece of analysis here. And I just want to say before I do that, first of all, for people commenting, welcome. Thank you, Cynthia Rice, for calling for the shout out for anyone who came over from Tony Michael's show. Shout out. Welcome to everyone. I also tune into that. And I'm noting a couple of people saying, hey, today I may not be commenting as much as possible because chipmunk milk buried under a pile of work. We will miss your comments, which are always pithy and insightful. But I hear you. And even if we're just the background music of your life, we appreciate occupying that position. And yes, just to underscore what I said at the very top, this is former U.S. Congressman Paul Hodes going just by Paul, just like you're like one of the Beatles. You're just Paul, former U.S. Congressman and prosecutor Paul Hodes, co-chairman of Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. And yes, I did shout out at the top that Uncle Cliff Schechter, is going to be coming on. Oh, rest in peace, Cliff Robinson. My goodness, what an awesome NBA player who was the original Uncle Cliffy. Cliff Schechter will be popping on later to give a little tease for the huge guest that he's having on his other show later on. But let me get to the question I wanted to pose to you, Paul. I was puzzled in this very short order that emerged 1 a.m. Saturday morning from the Supreme Court. It basically, there's one sentence saying, hey, there's an application seeking an injunction here. Sentence number 2, the matter's currently before the Fifth Circuit. Here's the third sentence. I want to read it to you. Maybe you can explain this to me. Upon action by the Fifth Circuit, the Solicitor General is invited to file a response to the application before this court as soon as possible. Would you be able to parse for us the significance of as soon as possible?
But first of all, there's invited. So this is not an invitation, people. This is
Right.
not
That's a euphemism.
Will you come to our party? This is, you better do it, and you better do it fast. But meanwhile, everything stops. Turn the buses around. Nobody's going nowhere. And what I think is important here is the clarity with which the Supreme Court acted in this case. And it may be, as a noted columnist in the New Yorker just noted today, this may be the Supreme Court finally saying, this guy is thumbing his nose at the courts. Enough is enough. Hold on, people. We're gonna figure this out. It may be. And if it is, that's really important.
And what about the as soon as possible? Is that potentially, speaking of Uncle Cliffy, a forearm shiver to Alito and Thomas, particularly Alito, who basically said, well, we shouldn't have rushed in here. We should have let the Fifth Circuit figure it out. Subtext to that is, and we should have let that bus arrive at the airport and deport another bunch of people unconstitutionally off to a gulag. When they say as soon as possible, normally there would be a process, as I understand it, but you're the legal expert, not me, where you would kick this kind of thing back to the Fifth Circuit and let them kind of proceed at their own pace. By saying as soon as possible, you're saying, no, code blue, stat, get on this. We invite you to jump in now. We're not waiting. It's like Spaceballs. This is now.
Yeah. We want to deal with this. We want to deal with this now because I think the Supreme Court sees, like many of us do. The ACLU said at one point, look, we're ready to go to the 90 different federal districts and file in every single one of them if that's what's required to deal with this issue. So you've got an executive who's thumbing his nose at the courts. You've got petitioners coming out of the woodwork. I mean, everybody's suing Trump. Everybody. I mean, I don't know. There may be more.
Yeah, we got to talk Harvard. We got to talk Harvard suing Trump.
So there's. I mean, everybody's suing Trump, and the Supreme Court sees, I think, a kind of they very well may perceive the constitutional crisis. Will he? He won't. Apparently, he won't. Trump won't listen, and his DOJ won't listen to district courts. They apparently won't listen to appeals courts. Are they going to listen to the Supreme Court? Maybe it's time to find out. Now, Alito and Thomas, that's fine. Okay, that's you can bet they're going to find some reason.
We're not exactly holding out hope there.
Slow down. So a few people go to El Salvador. I mean, it's okay. Right, but now you have Coney Barrett, and you have Brett Kavanaugh, and you have Gorsuch, and you have Roberts. Those are some pretty heavy-hitting conservative GOP names.
When Brett Kavanaugh says, guys, I think you're going a little too far. It's like, oh, wait, hold on. It's like if your doctor is checking you and goes, "Ooh, wait, hold on a second. Hold on. I'm not. Let me feel that again."
Wait a second. Those are words you don't want to hear at the doctor's office.
Things you don't want to hear. Right. I actually have a friend who's a public defender who once told a client, "You're in the least trouble of anyone I've ever represented," and she broke out in tears and gave him a hug. That's what you do want to hear. What you do not want to hear is Brett Kavanaugh saying, whoa, easy there, guys. Speaking of which, it wasn't all good news from the Supreme Court in the last few days. They have agreed to hear the Birthright citizenship case. My friend, ABC News legal analyst, Kim Whaley, who's a major Substacker, she Substacks under the publication named Simple Politics, wrote over the weekend. It's good. It's very clear. It's like snakes on a plane. You know exactly what you're going to get. It's like I went to a restaurant called Food on a Plate.
Hey, by the way, before you go any further, I now have a Substack.
I was gonna let you cross promote. Hey, Paul, you got to name your publication, man.
Oh, what do you want me to call it?
Well, if you just call it Paul Hodes, then it's not exactly snakes on a plane.
Okay,
it's got to be like congressman on a laptop.
Congressman on a stick. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I'll come up with
keep
a catchy name.
that. But yes, I will. I still invite. I want people. Substack's a little weird. They will. Yes, this is a good question coming in. So I'm gonna hit you with a 2-part question. I will just say. So Mizabella has a great point here in the chat. I will just say that people can find you, Paul Hodes. That's Hodes. It's not Hades. Although, anyway, but yes, people can find you and should find you on Substack, and we can put the link in the comments. But what do you make? What do you make of, first of all, Mizabella's Mzabella's comment? Does anyone think SCOTUS regrets their immunity ruling? That's a great question. And then what do you make of the fact that they took this birthright citizenship? Kim Whaley was saying on ABC, like, hey, if the law is super clear and it's in black and white and it's in the 14th Amendment, like plain English reading of the law, it's like, if you have a parent who is a U.S. citizen or they are on U.S. soil, you are a citizen. It says that explicitly in the Constitution. It would seem like there's not really a question. So should we read this as maybe not good news, the fact that they're willing to consider the question?
First of all, let's go back to Mizabella's question. Reading the tea leaves, are they unhappy about the immunity decision? God only knows. I mean, it was a numbnuts decision, but they're probably not unhappy because they think that, okay, we've kept him out of the criminal hot water. But all of the rest of this is it's not so much about him. It's about there is a thing called the Constitution, and we have been using it for a long time, and maybe we ought to keep it intact. So that leads us to the second question about birthright citizenship. Well, certainly everybody thought it was clear. Everybody has been following it without any question. And in fact, every time it's come up, it's been made perfectly clear birthright citizenship is in the Constitution, and that's where it is. Now, you have to give the trumpeters some credit, some shout outs, because you could say on the one hand, their specious arguments are inventive and imaginative. I might call them fanciful and crazy. And one possibility is that the Supreme Court has said, okay, we've gotten to this point. It wasn't good enough that we were kind of fuzzy about Kilmar Garcia and whether he got due process. So now we've said, hold on while we figure out the Venezuelans and the Alien Enemies Act and all of that. But we'll hear about birthright citizenship. And it's, I can't read the tea leaves on this. It's equally possible that they'll say, this is our opportunity to hear oral arguments and make clear in our oral arguments the Trump administration is full of you-know-what, and to make it so clear in the oral arguments that we get a chance to beat up on the Trump DOJ lawyers about this. On the other hand, who knows? They could be saying, well, maybe if we're slamming him over on the left hand, we'll find a way on the right hand to open some crack in the veneer of the amendment to the Constitution.
Well, say no to crack, people. That's all I want to say about that. No. I do want to note for people commenting in the chat. First of all, it's Mzabella, clarifies Mzabella.
Mzabella.
So we both put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. And Amethyst Peony is live brainstorming the name of your publication. Paul literally started this Substack today.
I had a few, but today I actually signed up.
He's got like 10 subscribers, so help a brother out. But we've got Hodes Explains Hades. We've got Hodes Holds On. And General Putnam, too, is suggesting that maybe you do something with your bio. You are, by the way, your handle on Substack is GTR Paul, which is Guitar Paul. People may not know, they almost certainly don't know, you are actually a very, very good guitarist. Like, you're not like one of these politicians who's a good guitarist or a politician.
I'm not like
you're a guitarist first, and then you became a politician.
That's
You,
true.
when you were running for the U.S. Senate, played guitar with Stephen Stills in his kitchen, and he was doing this the whole time, like,
yeah. So go to Spotify.com, people. Paul Hodes and the Blue Buddha Band. You'll hear some political stuff, and we got a new record coming out soon.
All right, there you
Anyway.
go. Let me hit you with a couple more because I know you've got a hard stop here. You've got other things to do on your big launch day, but I wanted to hit you with Pete Hegseth. And you told me a story once that I thought was interesting, even after a decade of being a congressional staffer. There's a difference between staffers and members of Congress, which is you're elected. I'm not. And so if I wanted to view classified material, I would have to get classified access, and I'd have to go through a whole thing. You, as a member of Congress, had the ability to see classified material. But what was really interesting to me is, could you just walk us through, because I think it really paints in stark relief the kind of like offhanded lack of interest and just disregard for security that Pete Hegseth has shown here, the way he's imperiled American service members' lives. Could you just walk us through like the physical process of how much protection is put around classified material when you're a member of Congress?
When you say, let me hit you with this, when you're talking about Pete Hegseth, that's like getting hit with yesterday's mackerel not wrapped in newspaper, because it's now come out that Pete Hegseth it wasn't just a benign one-time Signal chat. It appears that he's using Signal chat, including his wife and his brother and everybody else, to discuss all kinds of classified information, including where troops are, when they're going, what they're doing, what rifles they're carrying, what the bullets are. I mean, who they're going to hit, all the timing. So we just want to make sure. I guess it's a new kind of government transparency. When I was in Congress, and by virtue of being elected a member of Congress, I had access to classified information. So you'd think, oh, great, you can read the classified information. Not so fast, people. So here's what you had to do. You had to go to a special room. And outside that special room, there were it was like entering the vault, and then the vault, and then the vault, and then the classified room.
It's like in Ocean's 11, right?
Yeah, and by the way, when I was raising money and they invited me to the Las Vegas casinos to raise money, there was I think more security at the Las Vegas casinos than even at the Pentagon for the classified information. But I digress. So you'd come to the first door where they took your cell phone, they patted you down before you open the door. You're a member of Congress, right? And it's basically being strip searched before you go in. Then you go into the second chamber where they hold you in there for a bit, and to make sure they're probably x-raying your clothing. They open the door, you go in, you're interviewed to make sure that you are who you say you are, that you don't have your cell phone anymore, that you're not carrying anything that you shouldn't be carrying. Then they take you into a cubicle. And
is this a skiff? You're now in a skiff?
Yeah, and you're not in there alone either. You're in there with somebody else, a very silent, very serious minder. And the minder produces the classified material, which itself is redacted. So you don't even get to see all the classified material. And the minder sits with you while you review the classified material. And when you're done, you give it back to the minder. You exit through the 3 chambers. They give you your cell phone back, and you feel like it's an experience. They don't make it easy to see classified material. And even the classified material that you see as a member of Congress isn't the complete material. It's redacted to hide things like troop movements and armaments and war plans, for example.
I just want to point out what Mark Gauci is saying. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing in the chat. Worked in the military for 20 years around classified material. If any one of us did just a fraction of what Hegseth and his family had done, the MPs would have arrested us in no time. He's doing this on a regular cell phone, which I can assure you is being monitored. Not that hard. especially given how dense Hegseth is. Great head of hair, I suppose. So first of all, you've introduced, Mark, the idea that maybe Hegseth's head of hair is like snakes on The Simpsons, where it's actually a sentient entity in its own right. Maybe it is a Chinese military asset. Never thought of that, but I'm going to follow up on that hypothesis. And yes, I mean, others have also kind of made the same point that you're making, Mark, which is, these phones have clearly been penetrated, especially by Chinese intelligence, let alone Russia, Iran. We know that these hostile foreign actors are actively penetrating many systems in the U.S. government and are trying to use this kind of intel against us. The fact that he is giving date and time, our service members are going to be in this airspace at this time, that is traitorous. That is disgusting. And, Paul, I know you've got to get out of here in 2 minutes. Let me leave you on this thought. We just kind of ran out of time on this. I wanted you to contrast, it was a very different hopey changey period when you were Barack's national co-chair. I remember campaigning during that campaign in New Hampshire, and it was just a different time. And when you were in Congress, and some people put your bio up in the chat, you passed several important pieces of legislation. By the way, in the ACA, the fact that kids can be on their parents' health insurance up to age 26, that came from an idea that Paul passed into law as a member of Congress. Paul passed that into law as a member of Congress with a Republican, Mike Castle of Delaware. You worked together.
Right.
And it was a very, very different time where Mike Castle would have said, Pete Hegseth needs to be arrested, as Mark is pointing out, right? I mean, I want to ask you just on your way out, like, how profoundly have things changed? Or is there, from all of your friends still in Congress, is there anyone left on the Republican side who would have that kind of integrity and backbone left?
Certainly not publicly, and probably not privately for fear of retaliation. I served at a time when it was probably the last gasp of country above party. And I thought it was important to work with the Republicans. I wanted to work with Republicans on legislation. It made for better legislation, and it made for a better service to the country. So have things profoundly changed? Duh. Should we go back? Duh. So that's a good note for me to leave. To leave on in terms of the history.
Yes, because you, my friend, what's the quote I'm searching for here? Your fire has gone out of the universe. You, my friend, are all that's left of that bipartisan sane religion.
Maybe it's
place
time.
The quote, people.
Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for a comeback.
Maybe
there are people serving now who shouldn't be serving.
All right, people.
Bad thoughts.
If you want more, he is GTR Paul. We're gonna keep workshopping the name of your publication on Substack. People can find you there on Substack. Check out the Blue Buddha Band. We have a question here that you should address on Substack of where you got the name of your band, man. So we'll get into that next time you're here. I am going to oh, that's very nice.
That's
I am going to drop you like it's hot and bring in our next guest. Paul, be well. Take care. All right. So as Paul swiftly disapparates and turns into a pillar of smoke. By the way, my kids are now watching the Harry Potter movies. Very, very disappointed that unlike in the books where you just apparate and disapparate, pop. In the movies, you fly around like a pillar of smoke. Not sure that makes any sense. So let's quickly apparate onto the stage. My friend Ann Kim, my former colleague as congressional staffers, toiling in the bowels of the Longworth House office building, occasionally talking through, yes, WW, totally agree. The books are so much better. Occasionally trying to come up with rational economic thoughts. What I always appreciated about Ann is that unlike some of us who kind of dabbled in economics, I got a degree in economics, I got a degree in public policy, but I didn't really follow through and practice it. Ann was sort of our brain. She was where a whole group of us stored our brain. She's like the Horcrux, where we all stored our brain on economic matters when we were congressional staffers. She later became a contributing editor at Washington Monthly, and I'm going to keep filibustering and not let you get into word edgewise because I'm like that. Also, the author of Poverty for Profit: How Corporations Get Rich Off of America's Poor, a really, really outstanding book that I have actually read and benefited tremendously from. And we're going to talk about that and your star turn on Johnny Harris's YouTube page coming up. But Anne, welcome. First of all, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. It's great to be here.
It's delightful to have you. So I wanted to bring you in because I wanted to get our eye back on the ball that Hakeem Jeffries is trying to put it back on, which is the economy, which is the number one reason that we ended up with the Trump disaster back in office in the first place. The number one issue that people consistently told pollsters throughout 2024 for them, their motivation for electing Donald Trump was they saw him as a savvy businessman. They saw him as someone who could offer something on the economy, on cost of living, help them with the pocketbook issues that they were dealing with. And they thought, look, it's time for a change. We need a change. We think this guy can do better. We remember 2019 fondly. And this is the last thing that Donald Trump wants to talk about because he has unquestionably led to a total spiral, death spiral in the American economy and now, per the IMF today, the world economy. You have been doing a series of videos on the Cliff's Edge YouTube channel. You do them originally for Washington Monthly, and then I take your videos, which are already brilliant, and I make them worse by adding a little intro from me. And then I pop them up on the Cliff's Edge channel. And you've been really focusing on the fundamental economic mistakes that Trump has been making that have led to such a led to such a disaster. Where do you want to start? Dealer's choice. What do you think? What do you think is Trump's biggest mistake, or just pick one that you'd like to start with?
I know it's like the laundry list of mistakes is so long to where to begin. But let's focus on the tariffs because I think that the tariff policies are based on some fundamental misunderstandings that Trump has about the nature of the US economy and why we have been the dominant power in the world for so long, which Trump is flushing down the toilet as we speak. And then secondly, this fundamental misunderstanding of what tariffs can do. And those are kind of topics of those two videos we're talking about. So as far as like his fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of the US economy, he's talking a lot about bringing back US manufacturing, right? We got to have those factories. We got to have those factory jobs. We got to build this. Howard Lutnick had that famous little clip about bringing back the people who are doing little screws in the backs of iPhones and bringing back to the United States. Well, the fact of the matter is, we're a service economy. 85% of Americans have service-related jobs. And by service, we're not talking about flipping burgers and delivering pizzas. We're talking about the fact that we are, working computers, marketing, accounting, making movies. We're doctors, lawyers, teachers, professors. All of these are technically service professions, and they all require brain power. I mean, it's the greatest asset that America has is its talent. And that is what's driving the global economy. That is what drives the American economy. And Trump kind of wants to throw that away in favor of a bunch of factories that build things. Now, don't get me wrong, it is important to build things. And there is a national security argument. There are some things that we need to manufacture here. But tariffs are just not the way to go about it. And he is underselling our strength and services with this focus on tariffs and manufacturing. So that's huge problem number one.
I want to note that there are two threads of conversation going on in the chat right now. One is like from commenters like Lefty Gramps, who writes, I can't wait to sew Nike shoes together for $8 an hour. I mean, boom. I, as part of a congressional staff delegation, went to China, inspected factories, which were, by the way, this was very intentionally like put on display, like, look, happy workers. And, they were molding what were essentially Crocs, cheap plastic Crocs. I don't think those are the kinds of jobs that Americans aspire to. And I'm not saying that workers elsewhere in the world should be relegated to them or should be forced to do bad jobs, unsafe jobs, grueling jobs. I'm just saying that your point is so spot on that Trump's entire concept of what we want to go back to, we want to make great again, is fundamentally off. The
That's
other
okay.
thread that's going through the chat right now is, for some reason, a discussion about vampires and Anne Rice. I'm not sure what to do with that, other than to say, I thought Tom Cruise was astonishingly good in that movie. I was really quite taken aback. Apparently, so was Anne Rice. I thought the movie version of Interview with a Vampire was really much better than it deserved to be. And that's all I have to say on that. Okay. The other misconception that Trump seems to have, I mean, there's so many. And by the way, if people subscribe to my Substack, to Worth Knowing, you will see my upcoming conversation with one of my favorite economists. I'm so looking forward to this. I'm interviewing her tomorrow. It's Jessica Riedel of the Manhattan Institute. If you've heard that name and you're thinking, wait, was that Brian Riedel? Yes. Brian Riedel is now Jessica Riedel. Jessica is so smart, was the director for the Mitt Romney presidential campaign, for their entire budget and economic policy. And the reason I enjoy interviewing them is that they come at this from a highly conservative standpoint, and the total dismantling of Trump's economic concepts from that source is just, it's so refreshing and it's so honest. Anyway, that's coming up later this week in the show. And a lot of the points that Jessica's been making really align with another one that you made on the Cliff's Edge channel, which is Trump's entire concept of what it takes to protect an industry, to help an industry grow, is so backwards. His swing thought when he thinks of restoring American manufacturing seems to be either putting together little tiny widgets or the auto industry. And what's so fascinating is that his entire tariff approach has boomeranged. The auto industry doesn't want it. Auto stocks are tanking. And he seems to not get the disconnect. What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, so he had this like interview where he said, okay, well, if you don't want to pay the 25% tariff, then all you need to do is buy an American car. And that's where the misunderstanding comes in, because there actually is no such thing as a wholly American made car. And the reason for that is because the North American auto industry has been integrated for decades. I mean, one of the fascinating things I found out while making one of these videos is that the Ford Motor Company built its first factory in Mexico in 1925. It rolled out 5 Model Ts per day, which was like a paragon of productivity at the time. But by 1938, GM and Chrysler had factories in Mexico too. And then our formal relationship with Canada dates back to 1965, when President Lyndon Johnson signed the US-Canada Auto Pact with Canadian Prime Minister Lester Pearson. So these are like decades of relationships and integration that have occurred that just cannot be undone by a 25% tariff, which is going to hit US automakers very hard. So let's just take, for instance, the quintessential American car, which is a Ford F-150 truck. It is assembled here in the United States, but guess what percentage of the parts are actually American? It's less than half.
18%.
Not quite so bad, but it's 45%. Okay. And then the Silverado, another quintessential American pickup truck, right? 36%. And if you don't believe me, you can go to the National Highway Transportation Safety Board's list where they ask auto manufacturers to disclose the content of their cars. And you will see that the most American car by content is actually a Honda Odyssey. And it is also 70% American made. It's not wholly American made either. It's manufactured in the South here by a Japanese company, no less. So it's ludicrous to believe that 25% auto tariff is going to reverse all of that. And the automakers are in this position now where they can either pay the tariff or try to reshore some manufacturing, but they can't do both because they don't have the capital to do that, because they've got to pay the tariffs in the meantime. So it's a terrible position for the auto industry to be in. It's a terrible position for any industry to be in right now, to be faced with these tariffs.
I think it also points to, and by the way, I'm just because I can do the weave even better than Donald Trump. I'm the best weaver. I weave. I'm the greatest weaver. So I can both handle the conversation we're having and respond to Chipmunk Milk and say, I agree with you that Tom Cruise is exactly what you said, not an admirable character. However, that's why I was so surprised that he was really good and very credible as a vampire in that movie, because I guess there's credibility to being a vampire. I don't know. And the reason that I've just popped up on the screen, my own Substack, is because I'm being self-promotional, and also because I just posted Ann Kim's most recent video, which was also on the Cliff's Edge channel, on what's happening in the auto sector and the impact of Trump's tariffs. That was something that I posted on Friday on my Substack, so you can see that video. And of course, you can subscribe to me while I'm there, and I'll make sure to get Ann's Substack up on the screen as well before we get out. Speaking of Substack, let me ask you about kind of a theory that I'm working through, that I'm developing. I posted about this yesterday. What really stood out to me in the work of David Shore, the noted data analyst, pollster from the left, currently with Blue Rose Research, he put out a set of postmortem numbers on the 2024 election. And he found that a majority, 53% of Americans, favored a shock to the system. They said that things had gotten so bad, the need for change in America was so high, that they thought whoever became president next would need to deliver a shock to the system. Now, to me, this told a lot of the tale of what happened in the election. For all of his pathology, voters seemed to view Trump as a change agent. They saw him as someone who would get tough on immigration, which they wanted. They saw him as someone who would make the economy better and help them, which they wanted. And, as I mentioned in the article, Paul Begala once said that there are basically only two themes you run on in American politics. There's let's stay the course, or hey, it's time for a change. And he positioned himself as the change agent, for better or worse, mostly for worse. And I think that this kind of points to, when you look at the auto sector and the point you're making, exactly the dynamic that I think we're seeing playing out, which is he comes in and says, all right, we need a fundamental change. We've been getting screwed for decades. There's some truth in that. That resonates. People clearly feel that. But then you go more than surface level deep, and it's a mess of a catastrophe with no brain behind it. I mean, what do you make of my whole kind of theory here, that that's essentially what Trump is catering to, is this kind of hunger for change and this deep down sense on the part of a huge swath of American voters, American workers, that, yeah, something has gone badly awry in the American economy.
Yeah, no, I think the genius, so to speak, of Trump is that he was able to pinpoint that diagnosis, and look, there's no question that the past 40 years, the US economy has changed dramatically, and it has become much harder to get ahead. You've got to get an education. You've got to be in the right place. Opportunity is polarized along with everything else. If you're not living on the coast, if you're not living in a city, if you're in a rural area that used to rely on manufacturing, yeah, you're getting left behind, and you were rightly resentful. Now, the second part of your post that you didn't mention was the other chart about the growth in dependence on government benefits in some of these places that have fallen far behind. And since you raised that, I've been thinking about, what are those two things that reconcile the need for change, this anger, and at the same time, dependence on government, which would seem to imply that you don't want things to change, right? And I think the answer to that may lie in one of Arlie Russell Hochschild's most recent books. She became very famous for having written Strangers in Their Own Land about Trump voters. And she wrote a new one fairly recently, like right before the election. It didn't get as much attention as it deserved, called Stolen Pride. And this book really, she spent a lot of time in Appalachia. And what she theorizes is that what's going on here is resentment. Like, they know that they are dependent upon the government, but they don't like it, right? And that's why they want things to go back to the way they were, when it wasn't the case that they were looked down upon by the folks on the elites and shamed, basically, for having lost a way of life that they really treasured, and are having to depend on the government that they don't trust in order to get by. And these are really tough questions to handle. I wish it were as easy as turning on the tariff spigot. Trump certainly wishes that's the case too. But what he's provided everyone is just a cheap and easy answer that's coming back to backfire on us all and on the global economy to boot. I mean, we have a lot of hard work as a country in front of us, and we cannot hide from that. And I very much hope that as Democrats move forward, it's not just about we're not Trump, but about articulating a new vision that does speak to people, but gives them real solutions for moving forward, right?
Well, two thoughts. One, going back to the weave, I would like to address all the people in the chat who are wondering about my background. It is not a green screen. These are real books. I don't have Anne's book currently on the bookshelf, but let's just take The Great
Why not?
Unraveling out here from Paul Krugman. So this is, in fact, real bookshelf. Why am I doing this? Why do I have LEDs? I don't know. At some point years ago, the YouTube best practices people said, this is a great look to have behind you. So I went with it. It's not super creative. I am wide open for ideas on how to improve it. If people would like to suggest something else. Yes, it is definitely. Yes, I do. Lefty Grams, I do read the comments. I do. I'm totally on it. And I'm glad you brought up, now weaving back to the other thread, glad you brought up. I mean, that was another chart that I showed in that Substack post, which is the astonishing outgrowth. I should display it on the screen. The astonishing outgrowth of counties in the United States, where more than 25% of the people in those counties, more than 25% of their personal income comes from government assistance. And what's astonishing about it is not just that the number of those counties has grown sevenfold over the last 20 years, between 2000 to 2020, which is when we last have data. It's that all of that growth is happening in the red portion of the bar chart, not the blue portion.
Yeah.
The blue portion is counties that voted Democratic and where you have that many people relying on government assistance. The red portion is the much, much bigger, and that portion has grown tenfold. It is absolutely astonishing. And so you have people who really, really rely on the federal government working well to get them things that they need: healthcare, veterans benefits, Social Security, services of all kinds. And by the way, WW, I did used to have a US flag right behind me that had flown over the Capitol. Turned out people didn't like it. They said I look too MAGA, which is sad, right? Like the symbol of America has been co-opted by the MAGA forces. Maybe I should bring it back. The fact that people are so reliant on these services, and yet they have fallen for the conservative line that, well, the government, they're dysfunctional. They can't do things right. We need to privatize it. Someone I know wrote a whole book about that. Oh, wait, it's you. It's you. It's Ann Kim. And it just got the Johnny Harris treatment. I'd like to show everyone a clip of this Johnny Harris video that was just put out about your book. Here it is. It's just about a minute. Let's take a look.
Some years ago, the federal government declared war on poverty, and poverty won.
This is where things start to get a little bit murky, so we needed help. We got it from Ann Kim, who is an expert who literally wrote the book on this history and the modern day poverty economy, and sat down with us to talk through this history and how it works today.
Reagan started this privatization train. And it was really President Bill Clinton who not only hopped on board that train, but got it accelerating to its destination, which was total privatization of a lot of social services in America. So these are the folks who are getting government contracts to act as government in running welfare programs. They're basically agents of the government. They're mercenaries for the public sector. They're making huge decisions that benefit the everyday lives of low-income people. One of these companies, for instance, was a company called Maximus, which is one of the largest welfare services providers today. They had revenues of about $88 million in 1995, and just a few years later, their revenues are already up to $500 million. And today, they're a $4.9 billion business.
So that's just a flavor of that. People can check that out. I also interviewed you on the Beyond Politics podcast right when the book was coming out. But I mean, this really, your timing is really incredible, because you once again have this cognitive dissonance, this disconnect between the people who are voting Republican, who are most reliant on a good functioning federal government that provides services, who are also buying the hook, line, and sinker, this idea, this Trump idea, oh, it's a deep state. We need to fire these people. As Russell Vought said, we need to put them in trauma. It's absolutely astonishing. You must be, what are you filled with having written this book and seeing all of this playing out?
It's frustrating, right? It's frustrating. The hold that the mystique of the businessman, has on, government, whatever government can do, businesses do better. That's been the mantra of the Republican Party and the GOP since the 80s, as I say in that video. And it just, we haven't done a very good job as Democrats, as progressives, of making the case for government, and we've lost that battle for 40 years. I don't know how at this point we win it back. I guess we have to try. We may have to hit bottom before we are given the opportunity to make that argument. But yeah, I'm not articulating myself very well, but yeah, it's pretty frustrating, man.
Well, I think part of the job is we need to amplify and kind of re-resonate all of the points that you're making in your book, that you make in these videos. And you know who is really, really freaking good at that? Cliff Schechter.
Why, hello. Hi.
Cliff Schechter.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Kim.
Yes.
And sorry, stupid me.
I have been teasing that you would be making an appearance, that you would be popping out from behind the bookshelf as you are wont to do. Like Beetlejuice, I said your name 3 times. True. Here you are, and we were just having a conversation about this video.
You're saying I'm like a bad guy in a movie. You say my name 3 times. And
That's right. That's right.
The world will end.
That seems fair.
Yes. Yeah. We were just talking about the fact that there's this incredible, so Anne is now getting the star turn on Johnny Harris's channel, 1.2 million views on the video profiling her book, and really kind of, spotlighting the disconnect between the fact that MAGA people are cats. They think that they are completely independent. They are utterly dependent, and they are willing to buy into this autocratic line and sinker, BS of, oh, the government is your enemy. They're not, the people. And by the way, the Democrats, they're the ones in favor of dysfunctional government when he's the one who's making everything that these people rely on dysfunctional. It's absolutely insane. And I just wanted to pull together the various threads of, you feature Anne's videos on your channel, and you try to amplify voices like Anne's. And here you are.
It's crazy, isn't it? Well, whatever. We're in a very kind of, disparate world now with platforms everywhere. And, as we know, there's no there's no left-wing billionaires coming to provide infrastructure. So we build it up as we go, and that's here. And we're, we all try to help each other. I think a lot of us do. There's some exceptions, which I'm not going to waste my time going into, but a lot of us want to see others succeed because, we got into this because we care about this, and, we have family, and, I want my kids to grow up in a democracy. So I would like to help as many voices that are good at this and can do this as possible. So to say, I found it funny that you mentioned the cat kind of thing. As everybody here knows, I mean, I put these in my Substack newsletters. I have 4 cats and love them. One is diabetic.
I did not know this about you. Whoa. Yeah. You have 4 cats?
Damn right. And we love them. And I don't care. We dig them. We dig them. And yet even me, the cat lover, will, I often you see my cats at home, right? And, let's say my wife gets home and I'm upstairs and the door slams and one of our kitties or something go, who's like the sweetest guy in the world, our little guy who we call Steve. Steven Tyler, named after the Aerosmith lead singer. And he'll go and start growling. That's because, to me, that's also MAGA. You compared them as they think they're independent, but they're dependent, whatever. It's also they're in constant fight or flight. There's nothing else. I heard a noise downstairs. It probably is a threat. I should go try to deport it and throw it out of the country into somebody else's prison. Seriously, it's my cats act the same way, and they don't have functioning cerebral cortexes in the same way we do.
Listen, I don't want to lose the audience on this.
They don't have a parietal lobe that I'm aware of yet. maybe MAGA lacks that too.
Okay, I don't want to lose the audience on this, but I believe there are two kinds of animals, dangerous and delicious. When
if
Trump
you
said in the
even
debate
say
that they're
something bad
eating the
about cats,
I was in favor of that. I was rooting for it. But
wow.
look. Yeah,
You're
I
lucky
know.
you're still hosting this.
I'm willing to be provocative. I don't care. Hey, speaking of highly provocative, part of the reason we wanted to bring you in here, besides the fact that in the chat people clearly miss you, is that you, in addition to promoting the excellent work of Ann Kim on the Cliff's Edge channel, are also very much building up your Substack presence, your Substack live streaming, and you're continuing to live stream to Cliff's Edge. And you have a really outstanding guest coming later today. I wanted to let you promote it.
Actually, well, yeah, you got most of it right. It's actually the opposite. So I did this 12-hour live stream because I'm an idiot. I think I got the flu after that. But I had Matt on among some other great folks that joined me for that. And it went really big on there. And they gave me this show, which they produced and the art for and everything on Thursdays at 2 called Amped Up with Cliff Schechter, the blue amp sort of play in there, or they think I'm on amphetamines, one or the other, which, what are you going to do? But so I do that every Thursday at 2 p.m. there as a show. And we had a great, we had Greg Olear last week. We had Joe Walsh. We kicked off. We'll have a great guest this week. But no, today I am actually going on Jim Acosta's show. It's not my show today,
you're
Matt.
the guest.
I am but a humble guest, and I can't, I'm fanboying a bit. I'm going to admit it because I loved him on CNN, and I loved the way he kept, speaking truth to power, saying what he believed, even through the various ownerships of CNN, all of whom were stupid and conservative and don't apparently know how to build a brand because they're all over the place and don't seem to care about it. And when he got kicked off, he didn't get kicked off. They said, "Hey, would you like to have the 2:45 a.m. slot? We'd love to have you there, Jim." And he pretty much gave them his version of the finger. He had moved his show to Substack the next day. He already has over 300,000 subscribers and all this. And so he invited me to come on. And I was like, yeah, of course. And so today at not even at 4, but the ideal time of 4:20, don't you guys go thinking anything's going on there besides talk. I can only speak for myself. There will be no smoke on set, but 420 is having me on, and I don't even, I just know that it's a 20-minute segment on his show, and we're talking politics, international affairs, whatever the hell he throws at me. Hopefully, I can answer. So there you go.
Well, that's
so 420 Eastern, I should say, for everybody. Tune in on Substack. It'll be.
What's the significance of him choosing 420 with you?
I don't think there is any, unless he thinks I'm just a deadbeat stoner. And that's possible. And frankly, that's not an insult because being a deadbeat stoner is kind of cool and really a lot better than most other things one could be these days, with our current government. And in all seriousness, I'm not promoting being a deadbeat, but 420 was just when it worked out, and I was just excited to get the invite. And so hopefully the system will work because it's all on your phone, as people may know, at Substack. So I don't worry about it all when it's my show as much, but now it's he's calling me. So I hope it works.
All right. Well, we have successfully promoted your guest appearance, and I've splashed up on the screen a few things. The Jim Acosta show for people who want to grab that link. Be on at 420. It sounds like a relaxing time. And I want to make sure. So just circling back here to Ann, because the crowd is clamoring for more Ann Kim. If people want more Ann Kim, so your videos for Washington Monthly. First of all, you guys have got a lot. Actually, I'll let you describe it. You've got a lot going on.
Do I?
Well, your videos on my channel are awesome. So
yes.
I can
thank you.
For that. Thank you for providing them.
And thank you. I'm so grateful for the cross posts. I mean, they're amazing. So really appreciate it. And
you can explain things in a smart way, and I can't. So I think I can explain things in a bombastic way. So I like having you there because you're smart.
More compliments than I deserve.
Washington Monthly is doing a live stream as well, and you're doing videos on Cliff's Edge, and you're doing Washington Monthly videos, and you're writing for Washington Monthly, and you've got a Substack. You're very busy.
Well, the
Yeah.
Substack is kind of like a, an agglomeration of things, but we have started doing more stuff on the digital Washington Monthly side. Washington Monthly started in 1969. Cliff, you were an intern for Washington Monthly back in the day, right?
Oh my gosh. Not back then. This was a little before I was born, but I was an intern. And yeah, I was an intern for them when I first went to Washington, D.C. So it would have been 99, 2000 when I was trying to, figure out if I was going to be on the consultant side or on the writer, commentary side. And I've switched back and forth my entire career. Ended up here, and I think this is where I'll stay. But yeah, I was an intern, and I got to write a piece with one of their editors, Zachary Roth, on predicting, tell me if I was right or wrong, that Senate was going to become as partisan as the House under the new leader, a guy named Mitch
Wow.
McConnell, who would be taking over after Bill Frist. We showed all the ways that Mitch McConnell had been awful and terrible and unleashed gobs of money on everybody and believed in using procedure to screw with everybody. And that we predicted that the Senate was going to get a lot worse. And it turns out I couldn't have predicted. I was wrong only in that I don't even think I knew how bad he would make the
Right,
Senate.
right. That's incredible, Cliff. I mean, that's amazingly prescient. But you were
I
right. I
worked
mean, it was a
against
better
him.
degree.
Yeah, I mean, I'd worked against him in Kentucky. Actually, met my wife working against him. So something good can come out of something awful. We both were on that campaign, and you kind of started knowing in Kentucky, hearing stories, knowing who he was, and knowing how ambitious he was. All about power, not about money and fame like Donald Trump, but all about power. He needed it for whatever hole exists in his soul, and kind of knew that he was going to screw the Senate up. And of course he has massively. Before Trump ever got there, people forget he didn't let Obama put a judge on the court and other things. He made the filibuster not a once in a while thing you did, but on every bill needing 60 votes. And, completely destroyed that chamber. So thanks, Mitch. I think it was 2004 that we wrote that piece, 2003, something like that. So Washington Monthly is awesome, and everybody should get a subscription because it's a great, it gives opportunities to lots of people to write. So good stuff.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if people want more Ann Kim, I've got the Substack link right up here on the screen. Screenshot it, I guess, folks. And of course, if you're on my Substack, you will see links to her work, and her Substack is one of my recommended Substacks. And of course,
I got to do that. Find you on there, Ann. I'm sorry if I have not, but
I just joined actually, so it's brand new.
Yes, we're all rocketing our way up the lists. So look, I think we should wrap this up. Cliff, you've got a big appointment to keep, and you are the biggest star and hardest working woman in policy right now. I wish
you seem pretty cool too, Matt.
Oh, me? I'm fine. I'm like Kermit the Frog on the Muppet Show. It's like, I'm just in the middle of
I can sit here and list all of your accolades, including what a great 800-meter runner you were in high school. But I'll let that go for now. Some other time.
Some of us didn't have speed, but we could keep going methodically and mediocrely for a long time. That's actually, I should put that on my business card. The book is Poverty for Profit. You can see a summary of it on that Johnny Harris video. You can also get it from Amazon. And I have a link to that in the Substack note that I sent out about this live stream. And Cliff Schechter, best of luck on the Acosta show today.
Thank you.
Kim, we'll have you back, and we will see you soon. And to everyone, thanks for being on. Thanks for sticking with us. Looking forward to seeing you all next week. Take care.
Oh, I'll see you tomorrow, I guess I should have said. Same, that's right. I forgot.
Oh, yeah.
Tomorrow.
And for people, and a lot of you will see Cliff again tomorrow. And don't forget the big live stream on Substack on Thursdays. All right, that's it. We're out. See everyone.
Get everything.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.